Hello Synth Maniacs! Today I'm very excited to make a video on one of the most classic analog polysynths of the 1980s, the Elka Synthex. I got this as a belated Big 50 birthday present to myself. I turned 50 last month, but I don't celebrate birthdays that much in that sense anymore. I'm getting older. And most importantly, the day of my birthday also corresponded with my daughter's graduation from high school. So that, for me, was the most wonderful birthday present that I could get. And here's a very brief snippet of Grace's graduation.
Grace Sophia D. Nicole Antonio.
So today I'd like to go through the sound and the features of the Synthex and why it's a very important keyboard to myself, very important synthesizer. I kind of grew up with these sounds, and why it was important for the golden age of Italo-Disco that I like to say it's 1983 to 1985. 1986 was still great, but it by 1987 already had become more like Italo dance rather than Italo-Disco. And so for Italo-Disco, this was one of the less known but most wonderful instruments that you can get. All right, here is the Synthex, and I'm going to try to talk close to the microphone here because the Synthex does have a fan, and I haven't upgraded it to a silent fan yet, so it's still pretty loud, just like the Memory Moog and other synths of the era. It's got so many components inside that it needs a fan. So hopefully you can hear me right, and the fan doesn't disturb the action too much. But so here's a Synthex, and one thing I wanted to mention about the Synthex, a lot of people think of Jean-Michel Jarre when it comes to the Synthex because of the many sounds, but especially of the famous preset 46. It's a classic sound that Jean-Michel Jarre used, among others, from the Synthex. And also many other artists used it, such as great artists such as Jean-Michel Jarre, Keith Emerson, Jeff Downes, Stevie Wonder. And I love all these artists, of course, they're all fantastic artists, but for me, I associate the Synthex to the Italo-Disco, golden era of Italo-Disco of 1981 to 1983. It was, I guess, less known than the Oberheim OB series or the Prophet 5 or the PPG or the Roland Jupiter and so forth. But this one has that sound of Italo-Disco of 1983 to 85. And it was used by many artists in the Italo-Disco genre, such as it was used in Baby's Gang, Happy Song, a classic song of my youth, and also Lee Marrow, Shanghai. And from talking to Dizo Giglioli, he also used it in J.D. Jaber, Don't Stop Lovin', together with the Prophet 5, and many other songs in the Italo-Disco genre, but also in the synth pop and other genres of the early to mid 80s. And for instance, if you just select the first sound in the preset memory, you got that classic Italo-Disco sound, really. Let's talk about the features of the Synthex very quickly. I don't want to bore everybody with the features, but also has a nice sequencer on board, and that's also a key of that type of sound. From left to right, of course, section for the LFOs here, very comprehensive. Two different type of LFOs. You can sound these parts to oscillator 1, 2, pulse width 1 and 2, and then this separate oscillator with a separate depth to the filter and amplifier. Then there's a master tuning here. oscillator sync. These are the oscillator banks here. Triangle, sawtooth, square, pulse, oscillator 2, PWM, and ring modulation. Same thing for the second oscillator here. Then the glide and portamento section here. Noise generator, multi-mode filter, fantastic with low pass, band pass, two types of band pass and high pass, and then you can invert the envelope for the filter modes. Two envelope sections, one for the filter and one for the amplifier. Chorus effects, which is phenomenal, and envelope controls for the release and the hold. Here is a programmer section. You got the split, the double, and the memory, the preset, the panel, and the memories here. Here is a separate, again, LFO section for the that you can assign to the joystick here. And here's a sequencer, 4-track sequencer, really cool feature on board. And here on the right we have the final volume, master, and balance between, if you split it between the lower and the upper. And you can set it to mono or stereo. So it's kind of similar to the other big polysynths of the era, such as the Roland Jupiter 8 and you know, the PPG for features, and the memory Moogs, the Oberheim OB, that type of wonderful analog polysynth. Let's try to create a sound from scratch. We're gonna go to the panel mode. So now the panel is active, and we're gonna turn off the oscillator so there's nothing is playing. We're gonna select oscillator 1 with a sawtooth. Yeah, 4. Let's bring it up, and we just normalize the envelope so it plays. And let's bring in the second oscillator here. The detune on this machine has a very cool characteristic. It's different from many other classic polys of the era. It's got a nice flavor. So let's play a little bit with the filter maybe. The envelope is at max, so just I'm noticing this cap is wrong here. I need to clean it because it's a little sticky, but yeah, so this is the minimum, this is the maximum right here on the envelope for the filter. So let's do a sound like that. If you click on the release, then engages the release for the amplifier. Already starts sounding like a good sound. We can set this at 4 maybe. We can add a little bit of LFO. Actually, no, let's set the oscillator to the PWM, and let's modulate it, PW2. And now we got a really nice fat synth here. Now we can add the chorus effect, and position 1 is already enough. All right, another classic classic feature of the Synthex is a split capability, and just like many of the other counterparts, such as the Jupiter 8 or the OB8 or BXA. So right now we have it in split mode right here, and I have this sparkly synth sound on the right hand. And then I have a bass sound on the left hand. And this is why I'm saying this is a classic synth for Italo-Disco. It's got that classic Italian sound of that era, guys. Check it out. And this leads us to talk about the sequencer, the 4-track monophonic, each track is monophonic sequencer. But, you know, in Italo-Disco, a lot of time, the bass part was arpeggiated or sequenced. And the ideal way would be to have both an arpeggiator and a sequencer built on a machine. But I guess if you have to choose between the two, you might want to get the sequencer, because you can get some arpeggio style patterns from a sequencer, but not, of course, the other way around. So let's talk about the sequencer. Let's say we want to program this classic octave style 80s bass line. All you need to do is very simple to, the sequencer on the Synthex is very simple to use. You can have step mode or live mode. The live mode takes a little trickier. You have to maybe do like 2 or 3 attempts to get it right for the timing. So in this case, we can just use the step mode. You just go to right, and then you select the track, in this case number 1, and then you can put in the note, and this is to add rests. So we're just gonna put 2 notes in. We're gonna put this note, rest, upper note, rest. And then you press right again, and now it's registered. If you press stop, ready, and loop, and you start the beat, you can play the sequence by itself, so you just need to worry about the right hand as such. Of course, the great thing about this keyboard, many others of the era, you can sync it to a drum machine. Typically, it was the Lindrum or the Oberheim DMX or other drum machines of the era. I do have those drum machines. I'm not sure if I'm going to have the time tonight to hook them up, but let's keep talking here. Let's keep talking about the sequencer, because it's a really good feature of the Synthex. And let's say you want to do the double octave bass line that was typical of the era, and it would be something like so 2 notes instead of 1. Very simple again. So let's do right again, and then we pick the number 2 maybe. And you do it again. You always have to, you want to start with bass note as C, if not it transposes. So if you want to play in different keys, you have to transpose mentally, but it's not a big deal. So right now it's arm to play, and all we need to do is do this. and right again. And when you play back, the frequency knob controls the speed of the sequencer. And the gate controls the gate of how long you press the notes. Of course, you can achieve the same with the envelope section. And so let's try to play this little ditty with the double bass. I set up a string sound instead of the pluck sound on the right hand. And let's see what it sounds like, maybe like a pop song of the 80s ballad type with the double sequence. With the balance knob, you can adjust the volume between the right and the left. All right, but another great feature of the sequencer is that since you can split the Synthex, it is 8-voice polyphonic, so you can split it 4 and 4, and you can assign 2 different sounds to different tracks of the sequencer. So I mentioned Lee Marrow Shanghai at the beginning of the video. Let's try to recreate the bass line and the little synth part in fifth that comes in throughout the song. That song also has Fairlight, has a bunch of other stuff in it, but but just for the purpose of demonstrating the capabilities of the sequencer, let's do that. So let's do the melody line first, and it's in fifth. So I got this sound here. And it's a monophonic sound. I just detuned the oscillator, so this is in tune. When you bring it up, and you get that sound similar to the song, using one note and one patch. So we can record this in the sequencer. For example, we can record it on track number 2. And we're going to use this step mode. The song is in the key of D, but we have to we have to play in the key of C, because if not, it sequences wrong. So we're going to play in C, but when we play back with the note will be in D. So we do right, track number 2, and then we put in the notes. And right. Now when you play it back, similar to the song. Now it's got another part that goes like this. So we're going to add that second part to track number 3. So again, we do right, track number 3. And we have to start with the rests and then very slowly put in the notes. And again, we have to transpose to C, but then when we play it back, we'll be in D. So. And that should be it. Write it. Play them back together, see if it loops well. And it does. So now you can bring it in and out as the song progresses. So this is without the second part. And now we can assign a different sound to track number 1 and do the octave bass. So we split the keyboard, we go on the lower mode here and program a bass. So we split the keyboard and now on the lower we have a bass sound. And again, we can sequence it. And now we have the bass line. When you put it all together, so let me tell you a quick story of why the Elka Synthex is important to me. It's one of the first professional synthesizer I've ever played when I was a kid. The year was 1985. I was 16. I'm pretty sure it was 1985. It might have been 1986, but I'm pretty sure it was 1985. It was a summer when the Simple Minds' Don't You Forget About Me song came out. Fantastic song. And I was already super into synths for a few years, yeah, I started playing when I was a kid, like 11, 12 in middle school. But then I got my first electronic keyboard, a Farfisa Matador 14, 1984, 15. And so in 1985, 1986, I was already playing with my friends in school bands, in teenager bands and so forth. And I remember clearly one night, a summer night, we were having a gig by the sea. I'm originally from Tuscany, from the west coast Tuscany there, and we're playing a gig. And I don't know if I didn't have my keyboard or what, but I ended up borrowing the Synthex from another guy. This guy was older than us. He was maybe like 10 years older than us, and he had the Synthex, but most importantly, he had the DX7. You know, everybody was raving about the DX7. And I was just a kid. I was just starting to play, so I wasn't very good at it. I was okay. I was nothing fancy. I just remember that I didn't know what all the knobs were doing on the Synthex at all. I was just playing the preset patches. I remember this, that we played the Blues Brothers, Everybody Needs Somebody, and I was playing the brass patch, and I remember on this big Elka keyboard, remembering that brass is really nice, and I was playing something like this. I must have selected a brass patch such as this one here on the factory. So I was gonna play the Blues Brothers song, right? So today I will play like. With nuance. I still remember when I was a kid, I didn't know what chords, oh man, I can't remember the word in English. In Italian is rivolti. So basically different positions of the chord. So you can have like an A, you can have this, or this, or this, and so forth. You know, D can have this one, and so forth. When I was a kid, I had not yet realized that. So I remember playing that song that night on that big Elka Synthex like this. Jumping like a bunny up and down, because I only knew the bass, only one way to make the chord, starting from the root note only. So I didn't know that you could do this and save a lot of energy, you know. You know, basically just barely moving the fingers. I was doing the bunny hop. So I just thought this is funny. It's some memory that came to me. We played other songs that night. I just don't remember what other songs I play on the Synthex, but I just remember this one here. And then a few years later, I got more and more into analog synths. You know, already in 1987, I bought my first true VCO synthesizer, a Core Poly6, fantastic machine. And then when I went to college, university, in the late 80s, early 90s, I was in Rome, Italy. And back then, the Synthexes were affordable. Like you could get them for $500, even $250, really affordable, right? And I remember at least of 2 times that I went to, you know, back then there was of course, no Craigslist, no nothing, no internet. You open the paper and there was an ad. So I remember I went to see I wanted to buy a Synthex. I went to see at least 2 Synthex, and I didn't buy them. The first one was like the panel was all broken. It was in rough condition, so I passed on him. And the second one, I still remember, was working great, but it didn't have MIDI. It was one of the first models without MIDI, so I didn't buy it. And I still kick myself because I never bought it, and then I postponed it. Oh, I'll buy it later. And then in 1996, I moved to the States, and they're very hard to find here. So I never got it again. And so for my birthday, 50 years old, 34 years later, since that time that I played in the 80s, I finally have the Synthex, and I love it. All right, Synth Maniacs, I literally could be talking about the Synthex and going through the sounds for hours and hours. I love this machine so much, but unfortunately I do have a day job and I have to wake up tomorrow and go to work. So we'll do it again sometime and connect the Synthex to proper effects via the board, and connect it to the drum machine, sampler, maybe the Fairlight, and you know, we'll try to recreate some good songs. I will leave you with some patches that you can obtain on the synths in both split, double mode, dual mode, and also from the sequencer. As usual, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys at the next video.